Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's early, and I know this is our first session, so appreciate you guys being here. My name is Ria Jung. I'm a director of digital transformation at CACI, and this is my customer, Nicole Hyder from the Department of Defense. I'll let Nicole introduce herself.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and again, thank you guys for attending. My name is Nicole Hyder. I have worked for the Department of Defense in some shape or form, first as a soldier, active duty military, and now as a civilian. So about 19 years of service with the things that we're going to talk about on today. So we have a presentation for you today that is actually going to kind of talk to you about the things that we've been doing, but as a client of RIA's, I do want to emphasize the importance of this partnership that CACI has made with IBM for this session that we're going to discuss. I'm really big into, kind of making sure that, everyone, communicates and talks, is okay with going outside of the norm, because this is definitely outside of the norm, because for those of you who are contractors, you definitely know that there can be some, kind of blurred lines between what the government can do with contractors without actually having a contract in place, as opposed to, actually having one in place. So RIA over at CACI is my contractor in place. However, today's presentation is going to shed light on the importance of garnering relationships across other contractors, which in this case would be IBM, and the work that can be done, even though me as a client, I am outside of the picture. However, I am the one that has the use case. So basically, I ask Ria, we do what we do, and then she goes out and she makes these good connections, which is actually, we made this connection last year at the GovAI 2023. So you should be excited to be in this room, because there were a lot of great connections that were made, but the work that you're gonna see is all a result of us just talking about the things that we were doing with generative AI last year, and now we have a product where we have actually leveraged this particular conference to build that partnership. You can go to the next chart. Okay, so first I want to kind of give you an idea of, and I want to move out of the way because Ria has some exciting things, so I'm going to make this a little bit fast. But first I want to give you insight into the project that we've been working on together since 2019 with the rest of the team over at CACI and with the Department of Defense. So I actually work in the comptroller's office, and there has been a congressional mandate for years to modernize all of the legacy systems. So all of our legacy systems were in Oracle, and so my mission was to erase the Oracle footprint and put us into the software that is more modernized, that kind of fits the needs of the day. And so as you can see here, NGRMS, the Next Generation Resource Management System, it is a data collection tool for the sole purpose of collecting data from all of the agencies across the Department of Defense and presenting the president's budget every year. So as you guys know that we're coming up on an election, all of those things are gonna move to the right. However, we do have to submit or request the president's budget sometime in 2025, and I think we're all waiting to see when that's gonna be. However, just to give you a magnitude of the amount of data that we collect and the things that we do with this system that has now been implemented and is fully working for the department from a formulation perspective. We definitely have a budget now over 800 billion, so that plus is still, and that plus is moving up. But yes, billion with a B, $800 billion worth of funding that's in support of about 2.8 million military defense personnel, so that's military as well as civilians. And then the level of detail, there are about 65,000 plus budget line items, so giving you the different descriptions of what we're buying with this money, your taxpayer dollars, that level of detail. And there are tons of business rules that we have implemented in this system to make sure that we tell the same story to both Congress and to OMB. So those business rules force the exhibits, that 1,750 plus number of exhibits that we have to present across Congress and to OMB. Those business rules make sure that we tell the consistent story, because that is how we keep money in our budget. Next chart, please. So that is pretty massive, pretty massive. So over the past like a little bit over a year and a half or so, we've had the PPBE Commission, that's the Planning, Program, Budget, and Execution Commission that was put together over on the Hill, and they basically wanted to take a deep dive into what we as DOD are doing to better our process for creating that president's budget. So basically, again, going back to the requirement to modernize all the systems, now they're wanting to know, how do we streamline our processes? How do we, get more transparency, right? Because they're the ones who are marking our submissions once they come to the Hill. So with all of that, the PPBE Commission, they interviewed all of us, people from my office, people across my office, because they have different perspectives and things that will be impacted by whatever the results of this report was that came out back in March. However, when they went back to the congressional staffers, those what we call the congressional professional staff members, they highlighted a major challenge, which is those justification materials for those exhibits that you saw on that previous chart. And there are a lot of them. So just to be just kind of upfront, basically, those justification materials are not written very well. They're saying that they're missing information, and I will say, there are definitely, because I've seen it, witnessed it myself, there's poor quality in how that information is presented. And a lot of times, and just speaking from having been an end user, I worked at Washington Headquarters Service and for the Department of the Army before I took this job here at Comptroller. And so sometimes, just depending on who you are, what your program is, you may just copy and paste what you had last year because you didn't get a mark, right? Or you may have a new analyst that's not as familiar with the information, that they're needing to present. And it's crunch time, like things happen so quickly. But the bottom line is they complained about the quality of the justification materials that we're getting. And so again, we started the generative AI process about a year and a half, maybe 2 years now, which is what we presented last year. But this year, I'm going to move out of the way, but basically this year, Ria's going to talk you guys through the partnership that we garnered from last year's presentation with IBM. And so again, this is me as a client just encouraging everyone that's here, no matter what perspective or what place you sit in this whole process, is the importance of leveraging things that other people have already done. watsonx has been around doing generative AI type solutions probably longer than any company that at least I know. And so the opportunity to get to just not get into a contract with them, but just share, hey, we have a use case and you have this advanced technology that you've been working for years before we even thought about doing generative AI. So it's just, this is gonna be an example of what can be. And so again, to encourage you guys to not be focused on what you have, but what you don't have, but focus on what is out there that you could potentially leverage. And so with that said, I will turn it over to Ria and let her give you this grand presentation about the great work that she's been able to do with IBM.
Thank you so much, Nicole. All right, so Nicole laid out the use case, and it was basically, we've got to write tons and tons of narratives to justify the budget, the $800 million budget. If we don't justify it properly, we don't get the funding. So that is the main driver. Funding gets cut if we don't justify the budget properly. Okay, so of course, large language models are very good at writing and generating content, very compelling content. So we wanted to explore the art of the possible. Can generative AI strengthen budget justification narratives? And this framework, we wanted to develop a framework that could be applied to creating any products within the federal government, right? Using this framework where it's backed by sources, authoritative sources, where it's explainable, it's transparent. So we worked with IBM. IBM actually approached us and said, we have the technology, you guys have the use cases, let's partner up. So we did a co-creation and worked on a proof of concept, and our goal was to be able to use a set of authoritative documents to drive generating and strengthening budget justification narratives. And by the way, it's got to be trusted, production grade, and we need to see those metrics, because we probably still have a lot of people who are a little bit hesitant on AI writing justification or AI just kind of helping them in various ways. So we needed that trusted solution and those metrics to be able to support the case. So what we developed was called a JBook assistant. JBook is Justification book. It's a congressional, there are many of them, Nicole mentioned, there are over 8,000 budget exhibits alone. One book itself, just for the Army to talk about their O&M budget, is over 800 pages long. So there's many of those. So imagine how much time has to be put into creating those justification books. What we did, I'm going to kind of hurry up so that, because we've got a 9:30 session, but we used the Watson X platform, and if you're not familiar, Watson X it's an expansion from the Watson platform, but it's their generative AI capabilities. When we first started this, it was still kind of in development, so we were excited to learn from IBM, and we were excited to see what the art of the possible is, and how can we actually step outside of just using ChatGPT personally to actually create a solution that can be production grade. So our solution uses Watson AI to develop and train AI solutions. It uses governance, Watson X governance, to implement some AI metrics, explainability metrics. Discovery was used as a RAG repository. And then Granite is IBM's open source LLM that was used behind the scenes for the generative content creation. And you guys will hear a lot more about Watson X platform later on today, so I'm not going to focus too much because we want to show you how we're using this technology. Now, if you're familiar with generative AI, you know there's prompt engineering going on. You basically have to tell the large language model the instructions of what to do, how to respond, and the more detailed you are, the better the response. Okay, so here's kind of an example of what was used. It starts off with the role. You are a senior budget analyst tasked with creating impactful and concise justification. But here in the highlighted blue areas, you can see how it starts to bring in historical content. So we're looking at, through discovery, we're extracting historical justification book materials as insight. Okay, so it's basically, these are variables, and the prompt itself is generated dynamically where it's pulling in the content real time through our historical JBooks. We also have strategic documents in there because we want narratives to be strategically aligned. We also have, and then we ask the user to give a sample justification. We're not quite ready yet for generative AI to just know exactly how to generate. So we ask the user, give us a seed justification text, and we're going to strengthen it by aligning it with historical content, aligning it with the DoD strategies, and making it compelling, using language that is standardized with the right tone and compelling to Congress. So now imagine, though, that right now you can extend that, so you might even be able to tailor it in the future because we actually know what all the congressional members' interests are. We have a database that shows each congressional member and what their interests are, so that in the future that can be a source as well, and that our JBooks, instead of being the same thing, copy and paste from year to year, it can actually be tailored every year to who the congressional members are. Okay, so on the left side is just really simple, nothing fancy. It looks very much like ChatGPT. It basically says, can you please provide your sample justification? So in here, we just have a really simple example, increasing funds to support Operation Pathways. So within a few seconds, it creates a narrative, right? So this is really basic. The proof of concept we came up with was a 3-week effort. IBM was able to stand up a proof of concept very quickly with the Watson X platform. We used prompt labs to help. We used various techniques, ground truth analysis, where we provided them an example of what the generated text should be, and they were able to give scores and then use that, apply that in this, whoops, let me go back. It totally fast forwarded on me. Okay, so this content, the content itself, when it's generated, is pulling the historical Army and Air Force JBooks, strategic documents, DoD initiatives from Watson Discovery. And Watson Discovery has many, many features. For example, it can look at historical JBooks and extract out patterns, formatting patterns, and we worked with the team to label it. I'm not sure why it keeps going forward. We also have explanatory metrics, things like, so if you think about it, unlike traditional programming where you can test and say this works or it doesn't work, it is really difficult to test and evaluate how well a generative AI performs, right? So we wanted some more qualitative metrics. So things that we used were relevant scores. I apologize, I think something was recording and so relevant scores is how relevant is the content that's being used in the generation. Attribution scores is how much of the retrieved content was actually used in the final generation. And then readability score is how well, how easy is it to read. So those are kind of examples of 3 metrics that are used to measure. Now, as we're going through this process, it was really hard to figure out, okay, the concept of the human writer versus the AI writer. So we struggled with, where's the balance? How much of the human writer do we need to feel like this is trusted so that we can feel confident about it? And how much can AI write, right? But the idea is that we start off with the human giving that seed, but in the future, AI can be the one that helps to write 90% of it. And AI can actually pull in the qualitative, the budget data, the amounts, and embed it into the text as well. But right now, I think part of this solution is not only developing the proof of concept, but it's also getting everybody to think about the future and start to embrace it culturally. Congress might, we don't know if Congress is going to say, oh, AI wrote this, I'm not sure how I feel about that, right? So this is also our way of kind of starting to get that concept and that idea out there so that people embrace AI as a tool, not something that is threatening. But there are still biases, and some people may say, I'm not getting anywhere near that, because, but once you start to see if, like myself, if you guys are all using tools like ChatGPT and Claude, and you're going to see very quickly how much it boosts productivity. And so we're going to try to go from weeks to days to hours so that analysts can actually spend time reviewing and making sure the story is compelling versus trying to write and learning how to write and just they end up copying and pasting from previous years. All right, so what we learned, I believe this is our last slide. So what we learned using the proof of concept is that the Watson X platform, we were very quickly able to stand up this proof of concept. We actually got it out to a couple end users, to try out. It's very early stages, but very promising, and we're trying to take the next step. Like, what does that next step look like? Not sure what just happened there. The metrics, trusted AI solution with all those metrics was really important to us. So being able to see those were built into the Watson X, the governance platform, was really important. And I think that's going to be key to making sure that users feel confident and that they trust the solution. The explainability metrics, it helps us to define and to explain how that content was generated. Areas for improvements. This is more for not necessarily the Watson X platform, but for everybody who's trying to build generative AI platforms. We want to rely on a knowledge repository of authoritative documents, but if your authoritative documents are conflicting with each other, for example, we had Army and Air Force JBooks in there. There were we were trying to pull relevant data, but they were different in Army and Air Force. And we realized you really need to segregate out your spaces. You've got your knowledge base has to have different areas so that your relevant content is not conflicting. We really need prompt engineering. We gave everybody the opportunity to be open with their prompts, and that was too much, right? Because people were like, I don't know where to start. It was too much. So we're honing it down to 3 different use cases, if you will. 1, align with strategy. 2nd, make the language more compelling. 3rd, consider the previous historical JBooks, historical markings, and make it more compelling based on that. So that's a 4th one might be align this to this congressional member, right? So there's so many different ways, but we realize that because it's so broad, we definitely have to narrow it down to maybe 5 to 7 different ways for LLMs to strengthen the justification. And I think that's it. All right, thank you so much, guys. I think we have another session starting in 5 minutes, but does anybody have any questions or, yes?
How are the exploratory metrics exposed? Is it like something that the Watson X platform provides, or are you asking like an LLM to grade itself, and do you have a rubric that's from the government, or?
Yeah. The Watson X platform provides those metrics. So they already have a number of metrics. Earlier on when we did this several months ago, they were going to be adding more. So there are many health metrics, PII, relevancy, all of that is already built in, and we just exposed it on the UI.
Well, I have a quick question. The seed that you mentioned, like, I know yesterday there was a great Watson X demo that showed like how the Watson X agent was able to ask enough questions to like, populate.
Right.
Are you doing the same thing here, or is the seed just kind of like here's a one-time blob that is?
So, yeah, that's a great question. So that was definitely our next step is we didn't want the user to just give us this one time. We wanted to be able to go back and have the AI be collaborative and ask questions. Can you tell me more about this? What are your, what are your key points, key takeaways that you want to include in this justification? We just hadn't gotten there yet, but that was definitely a next step. Yes?
What about user free feedback? Like if somebody reports the answer was inaccurate or not correct, is there a process by which that's corrected LLM learns?
Correct. Yeah, we didn't get there either, but these tools always have a way for users to give feedback. That's really important. We just didn't happen to get it there, but that's built in as well. Anything else?
I'll say one last thing in closing. Again, we're encouraging and motivating people to start somewhere. I will say that I did not have resources to even start something like this, but RIA over on the khaki side, they had a transformation office. And so right now today, I do not have an environment where I can physically do this in the government space, but this is an example. We are an example of doing something with nothing. So we didn't have certain resources, but we used what we had, and this is how we got to where we are. So I want to just encourage you guys as we close this out to say start somewhere and just think beyond what you're accustomed to seeing right in front of you. Reach out, find out, like do the research and connect with people, because this is how we've gotten this far along with no resources. So don't let resources stop you. Have a can-do attitude, have a will-do attitude, and we as a collective, we're gonna figure this AI stuff out because it is kind of scary. Thank you.